Boss in disguise catches racist staff red-handed and delivers the ultimate payback. You know those moments when the room goes dead silent, right before everything changes? That was the scene when James finally stood up, looked the so-called untouchable straight in the eye, and said 6 words that dropped like thunder. Actually, I own this place. The color drained from their faces. Their smirks collapsed into stunned silence. And in that instant, all the little power games, the cruelty, the whispered slurs, they didn't just backfire. They detonated. But let's not jump too far ahead. To really feel the weight of that moment, you've got to know how we got there. James wasn't the type of boss you'd expect. No expensive watches, no corner office strut, no barking orders from behind a desk. He was the kind of man who showed up in rolled sleeves, carrying boxes, wiping down counters, cracking jokes with the team. To most employees, he was just James, maybe a shift lead, maybe a guy filling in. Almost nobody realized he was the man who signed their paychecks. And that's exactly how he wanted it. See, James believed you learned more about people when they thought no one important was watching. And he wasn't wrong for a while. Things ran smoothly. But then came the clique. You know the type. Loud when they shouldn't be. Quiet when decency was needed. They laughed at the wrong jokes, and worse, made them. Not silly, harmless banter, the kind that makes your stomach twist. Racist jokes spat with sharp edges. Smirks shared like secrets. And a smug certainty that no one would ever hold them accountable. And James, he noticed. Every time. He kept his cool though. Listened more than he spoke. Took mental notes. Because here's the thing. Revenge, real revenge, doesn't come from impulse. It comes from patience. And James had plenty of that. Still, there's only so long you can watch poison drip before it corrodes everything. And when they finally crossed a line loud enough for customers to hear, cruel enough to cut someone to the bone, James knew his quiet disguise was about to come off. This wasn't just about a toxic workplace anymore. This was about respect, about dignity, about making sure no one thought they could spit venom and walk away without consequence. And when the moment finally came, when James revealed who he truly was, the fallout wasn't just satisfying, it was nuclear. But before we dive into that glorious reveal and the chaos that followed, a quick favor. If you love stories where justice isn't just served, it's chilled, plated in silver, and delivered with a smirk, hit that subscribe button. These videos take hours of writing, editing, and let's be honest, recovering from second-hand rage. Your support helps us keep telling stories that remind us karma's not just real, it's punctual. All right, buckle in, because this is the story of how one quiet boss, armed with patience and principle, caught his staff red-handed and delivered the ultimate payback. James didn't look like a boss. That was the whole point. No tailored suits, no shiny watch glinting under fluorescent lights, just worn-in jeans, rolled-up sleeves, and the kind of easy smile you'd expect from a shift supervisor trying to keep morale up. But behind that ordinary exterior was the man who owned the building, signed the checks, and made sure the lights stayed on. He could have been the untouchable figure in the upstairs office. Instead, he was right there on the floor, stacking boxes, brewing coffee, hauling trash bags alongside everyone else. Why? Because James had learned something early on. People reveal who they really are when they think no one important is watching. Titles, he figured, got in the way of truth. If he played the part of just another co-worker, he could see his staff unfiltered. No sugarcoating, no performance, just raw behavior. And for a while, it worked beautifully. Most of the team were good people, hard-working, kind, sometimes exhausted but still decent. There was Maria, who stayed late to help new hires find their footing. Devon, who covered shifts without complaint. Little moments of quiet integrity that made James proud, even if they didn't know who they were really impressing. But then, there was the other group. The ones who thought volume was the same as confidence. The ones who laughed too hard at the wrong jokes, as if cruelty was comedy. a tight little clique that fed off each other's energy, growing bolder the more they went unchecked at first. Their behavior hid under the mask of banter, but James heard it. The edge in their voices when they mocked an accent, the pointed smirks when a customer walked away, the way their eyes darted around, making sure only the safe audience was listening. And here's the thing about poison. It doesn't need gallons to spread. Just a few drops, steady over time, and it starts corroding everything around it. James could see the shift. The good employees shrinking back, avoiding confrontation, hoping someone else would speak up. Silence became the survival tactic. After all, who wants to be the lone voice challenging the pack? Especially when the pack was loud, cruel, and at least on the surface untouchable. It weighed on him though, because James knew better than anyone that cultures rot from the inside. It's not always the big scandals that destroy a workplace, it's the small, everyday digs that fester until good people give up and leave. So he listened, watched, waited, not because he was weak, but because timing mattered. If he moved too soon, they'd deny it, spin it, maybe even rally others to their side. No, he needed them to believe their own lie that no one important was paying attention. One night, Maria caught his eye after yet another cutting remark had been tossed across the break room. She didn't say anything, just shook her head and gave a tired smile that said, "This is just how it is." And that's when James felt that quiet fire in his chest. He hated that look, the resignation, the way good people folded themselves small just to make space for bad ones. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. And it sure as hell wasn't going to last, but for now, he played his part, rolled up his sleeves, blended into the background, and let them dig their own graves with every careless word. Because the beauty of pretending to be invisible. You hear everything, and James heard enough. Before we go further, I want to ask you something, because I think a lot of us have been there. Have you ever worked somewhere toxic but couldn't speak up? That awful mix of frustration and helplessness, knowing something's wrong, but feeling powerless to change it. Drop your experience in the comments if you've been in those shoes. Trust me, you're not alone, because in this story, silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. And James was about to prove that the quietest person in the room sometimes has the loudest power. If you've ever worked in a place where a few bad apples spoil the whole bunch, you'll recognize this crew instantly. The clique, 4 of them, always together, always smirking like they were in on a joke no one else deserved to hear, and their favorite pastime. Turning that joke into a weapon. It started small. Snide little comments muttered under their breath when certain customers walked in. "Here we go," one of them whispered once, rolling his eyes at a family speaking Spanish at the counter. His friend snorted, then mimicked the accent loud enough for the others in the group to laugh. Not belly laughs, not harmless giggles, sharp, cruel laughter, the kind that makes your skin crawl. James heard it all. He'd be wiping down tables or restocking shelves, his face calm, his movements unbothered. But inside, each remark left a mark. He didn't flinch though, didn't let on, because the second you give away that you're listening, they clean up their act. And James needed to see them as they truly were, raw, unfiltered. The clique grew bolder. When a delivery driver from out of town showed up, one of them sneered, "Guess they'll let anyone drive a truck these days." His tone wasn't about skill, it was about the man's skin color. Another time, a customer asked a perfectly normal question, and one of the clique muttered, "Figures, they never understand English." His buddies chuckled under their breath. This wasn't banter. It wasn't misunderstanding. It was racism, plain and simple, wrapped in sarcasm, hidden behind fake smiles. And worse, it created this invisible permission for others to stay quiet. Because here's the truth. Silence in the workplace is heavy. It's the good employees lowering their gaze, pretending not to hear, because speaking up might cost them hours, or even their job. Maria, the kind-hearted one, would bite her lip so hard it almost drew blood. Devon clenched his jaw until you could see the muscles twitch. They hated it, but they didn't feel safe enough to fight it. And James, he just watched, patient, steady, like someone studying a storm pattern. He started documenting it all. Mental notes first: who said what, when, who laughed, who didn't. Then, slowly, quietly, he wrote things down. Dates, times, exact phrases. Because while some people underestimated him as just another coworker, James understood something vital. Memory fades. But paper doesn't. The clique didn't stop at customers either. They turned inward. New hires became their favorite targets. A quiet kid on his first week was mocked for not fitting in. A woman with an accent was interrupted, corrected, told she was too slow. They even made fun of the janitor behind his back, calling him the mop man, like his work made him less human. IT chipped away at the air itself. The workplace didn't feel safe anymore. It felt like walking on cracked glass, every step risky, every interaction laced with tension, and through it all, James said nothing. He'd nod, keep working, keep listening. Sometimes one of the clique would even joke with him, trying to pull him into their little circle. Hey James, you get what I mean, right? They'd wink, waiting for validation. James would just smile faintly and shrug, playing the part of the harmless bystander. But make no mistake, he was cataloguing every word, every smirk, every disgusting punchline that wasn't funny at all. One night, after a particularly ugly exchange where the clique openly mocked a customer's hijab, James sat in his car in the dark parking lot, hands gripping the wheel. He wasn't angry in the wild, shouting sense of the word. No, this was colder, sharper, that kind of anger that doesn't explode but calcifies into resolve. This, he muttered to himself, isn't going to last. Because what the clique didn't understand was that every act of cruelty was a deposit into a debt they'd eventually have to pay. And James was keeping meticulous records of the balance. Now, if you're listening to this and thinking, I've seen something like this before, let me ask, what's the worst workplace behavior you've ever witnessed? Was it the gossip, the favoritism, or maybe something darker, like what James saw? Drop it in the comments. I want to hear your stories. Because stories like this aren't rare. They're just rarely confronted. And that's what made James different. He wasn't just going to watch this rot spread until the good employees quit. He wasn't going to let the clique keep winning because of fear. No, he was playing the long game, waiting until the mask slipped completely. Because here's the thing about arrogance. It always overreaches. The more they got away with, the bolder they became. And the bolder they became, the sloppier their cruelty got. It was only a matter of time before they pushed too far, loud enough, public enough, that even silence couldn't cover for them. And when that happened, James wouldn't be silent anymore. It happened on a Thursday. Lunch rush, the kind where every table is full. Phones are ringing off the hook, and customers are three deep at the counter. Tension was already high to many orders. Not enough hands. But that's when the clique saw their chance. A woman walked in with her young daughter, the kind of pair that radiated warmth hand in hand, chatting softly in another language as they scanned the menu. The daughter couldn't have been more than 8. She tugged at her mom's sleeve, pointing at the pastries in the display. And that's when one of the clique muttered loud enough for half the staff to hear, "God, here we go. Can't even speak English. Bet she'll hold up the line." His buddy laughed. Not quietly, not discreetly. Full laugh, sharp enough to slice through the hum of the crowd. The woman froze. Her daughter's smile faltered, eyes darting nervously. That little bubble of warmth, gone, replaced with the heavy silence of humiliation. James was 3 steps away, wiping a counter, his hand stilled on the rag. He felt the air shift, the uncomfortable coughs, the customers pretending not to notice. Maria's face flushed red with anger, but her lips pressed tight shut. Then, as if it wasn't bad enough, another voice chimed in. Maybe she should teach the kid to translate. Save us all some time. And that was it. The laughter, The smirks, the child shrinking behind her mother's coat, it crossed from cruel banter into outright cruelty. Public, undeniable, unforgivable. James's pulse hammered in his ears. He wanted to walk over right then, slam a fist on the counter, and unleash the truth. I'm your boss, and you're done, but he didn't. Not yet. Because in that moment, he realized something deeper. This wasn't about his anger. It was about the woman. The child, the staff forced into silence every day. The mother straightened her shoulders. With quiet dignity, she placed her order, ignored the snickers, and guided her daughter to a table. No retaliation, no confrontation, just a silent shield. And somehow, that made it worse. James finished wiping the counter, his movements steady, though every muscle in his body screamed for action. He caught Maria's eyes across the room. She looked at him like she wanted to say something but didn't dare. Devon stared at the floor, jaw tight. The clique? They carried on as if nothing happened, like it was just another day, another joke, like cruelty was casual. And that's when James knew. No more watching, no more waiting, no more silence, because silence in that moment felt like betrayal. He excused himself, looked into the back office, and pulled out his notebook, the one he'd been quietly filling for months. Date, time, names, direct quotes. Today's entry set like a nail in a coffin. His hand trembled not from fear, but from a surge of clarity. The patience, the disguise, the endless notes, they weren't preparation anymore. They were weapons, and it was time to use them. James leaned back in the chair, exhaled slowly, and said it aloud for the first time. That's it. I'm done. They're done. The decision clicked into place with finality. This wasn't just workplace drama. This was rot that had infected his business, his people, his customers, and he wouldn't let it spread another day. He walked back onto the floor. The lunch rush had thinned, but the tension lingered, like smoke after a fire. The woman and her daughter had already left, their chairs pushed neatly under the table, untouched drinks still sitting there. Proof of what hate can ruin. James picked up the cups, carried them to the back, and placed them in the sink. His hand stilled, gripping the edge of the counter. He stared at his reflection in the steel and thought, this ends now, and here's where I'll pause because I want to hear from you. What would you do if you saw this unfold at work? Would you speak up, confront them, or like James, wait for the perfect moment to strike back? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I think we've all wondered where the line is. For James, that line had been crossed. And when the moment finally came, his silence would break not with a whisper, but with a reckoning. Because that Thursday lunch rush wasn't just another shift. It was the spark that lit the fuse, and the clique. They had no idea the explosion was already on its way. That's when I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. The breaking point had already passed. Thursday's incident with the mother and daughter wasn't just another tally in James's notebook. It was the final entry, the proof he needed, the push he'd been waiting for. And the very next morning, he acted. James walked into the CF early, long before the clique arrived. He brewed himself a black coffee, opened his notebook on the counter, and stared at the mountain of documentation he'd collected. Months of dates, times, names, verbatim quotes. Each line a blade, each page another nail in their coffin. This wasn't about catching them anymore. It was about ending them. By the time the others shuffled in, James had already emailed our. The subject line was short, almost cold. Documented misconduct. Staff behavior report. Attached. Every single page of his note scanned, dated, categorized. He didn't dress it up. He didn't soften the language. Just the truth, laid bare, and still, he wasn't finished, because paper trails can be ignored. Emails can be buried. But public humiliation, that leaves a mark. That afternoon, he waited, sat quiet at the back, pretending as he always had to be just another staff member cleaning tables, watching, listening, waiting for them to slip, which of course they did. They always did this time. It was a new hire, barely 2 weeks in. She made the mistake of forgetting to refill the napkin dispensers. One of the clique mock, the loudest one, mocked her in front of customers. Guess they'll hire anyone these days. Can you even spell napkin? The others laughed, because of course they did. It was their ritual, cruelty disguised as comedy, but James didn't laugh. He stood, he walked straight to the counter, and with a calmness that made their grins falter, he said, "Mark, you've got a loud mouth for someone who's about to be unemployed." The CAF fell silent. The kind of silence that prickles your skin, heavy and expectant. Mark blinked, thrown off for the first time. "What?" he scoffed. "You'll just know," James cut in. "I'm not just anything. I'm the owner of this business, your boss, and I've been listening to every word that comes out of your mouth for months." Gasps. A spoon clattered onto a saucer somewhere in the room. The new hire's eyes went wide. Maria's hand flew to her lips, a smile already breaking through. Mark tried to laugh it off. "Yeah, right. If you owned this place, you wouldn't be bussing tables." James reached into his apron pocket and pulled out his phone. One click, and the HR email appeared on the screen. He held it up. The company letterhead, his signature at the bottom. "Check the email you'll be getting later today if you don't believe me." Spoiler, it won't be a raise. The color drained from Mark's face. The others shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other. Suddenly very aware of how exposed they were, James didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Authority rolled off him like heat from a furnace. "I've watched you mock customers, harass co-workers, drive good people out of this place. And yesterday, you humiliated a child." A child. That was your last mistake. Silence. No laughter. No clever retorts. Just the sound of their empire of cruelty collapsing. He turned slightly, sweeping his gaze over the rest of them. "Don't think this is just about Mark. Every single one of you played a part. Every smirk, every laugh, every cruel word, you'll find it documented, dated, recorded." He let that sink in, watched their bravado crumble, piece by piece, and then, almost casually, James added, "HR will decide your futures here. But as far as I'm concerned, you've already burned your bridges." Mark opened his mouth to argue, but James lifted a hand. Just a small gesture, but enough to shut him up. "Save it. There's nothing you can say that isn't already in writing." The staff around them, Maria, Devon, the new hire, looked on with something close to awe. Relief too. The kind of relief you feel when a nightmare finally ends. James exhaled slowly, then stepped back, voice soft but final. "You thought I was invisible, disposable, just another face behind the counter. But the truth, I was watching you the whole time. And now everyone else gets to see you for what you really are." He left them standing there, speechless, in the ruins of their own arrogance. Later that evening, HR called. Immediate suspensions, pending investigation. A full review of workplace conduct. James didn't even need to push. The evidence spoke louder than he ever could. But the real victory? It wasn't in the paperwork. It was in the atmosphere the next morning. The sea air felt lighter, quieter, safer. The new hire smiled for the first time since she started. Maria laughed, a real laugh, not one buried under fear. Customers lingered longer, comfortable again in the space, and James, he poured himself a coffee, leaned against the counter, and finally allowed himself a small, satisfied grin. He hadn't just reclaimed his CAF, he'd reclaimed his people. And here's where I'll throw it to you. Have you ever wished you could see someone get called out instantly? Right there, in the moment. No hiding, no excuses. Because that's exactly what James gave them. Instant justice. The kind you don't forget. The reveal had landed like a thunderclap. But thunder only warns you of the storm. It doesn't tell you how long it will last. And in James's CAF, the storm was just beginning. Within 24 hours, HR acted. Formal emails went out. Words like suspension, investigation, and termination pending review filled inboxes. For the clique, it was a reckoning they never saw coming. Mark was the first to go. He stormed into the CAF one morning, red-faced, spitting curses under his breath. He tried to plead his case with James directly, but it was pointless. The decision wasn't James's alone anymore. Corporate had the evidence, and they weren't about to risk liability. Mark left the same way he lived in the CAF, loud, bitter, and convinced he was the victim. Two others quit before they could be fired. They saw the writing on the wall. No farewell, no apologies, just vanished into the ether. The last couple tried to hang on, begging HR for one more chance. But months of documented abuse don't vanish because you suddenly say sorry. They were gone within the week, and just like that, the clique was dismantled, but the absence they left behind, that was the real story. At first, the CF felt quiet, almost too quiet. People looked around like they were waiting for the next insult, the next cutting remark. Maria admitted she kept checking over her shoulder, out of pure habit. Devon confessed he'd been rehearsing comebacks in his head, even though no one was there to taunt him anymore. That's what toxic culture does, it lingers. Even after the source is gone, James knew this. He didn't just want to fire the bullies, he wanted to rebuild the soul of his CAF. So he started small. Staff meetings, not lectures. Honest conversations, not corporate memos. He asked questions like, what made you feel unsafe here? And what would make you proud to work here again? The answers broke his heart. Stories of constant humiliation, of people who quit not because of the job, but because of them. One new hire admitted she nearly walked out after her first week, said she thought she wasn't cut out for food service. James told her the truth. It wasn't you. It was them. That mattered. More than the firings. More than the paperwork. Slowly, the energy shifted. Maria, once so quiet, began cracking jokes with customers again. Devon took on mentoring the new staff, showing them the ropes with patience instead of fear. The young woman who forgot the napkins, she became one of the CAF's most reliable employees because now mistakes weren't met with cruelty, but guidance, and customers noticed too. They lingered longer, smiled more, left bigger tips. Some even commented on the new atmosphere, not realizing the drama that had played out behind the scenes. Of course, not everyone celebrated. The clique had their defenders friends outside the CAF who claimed James had gone too far. People make jokes. Big deal, one said on social media. Another accused him of being power-hungry. But James didn't respond. He didn't need to. The truth was on his side, and the CF itself had become proof that cutting out the rot lets the rest of the tree grow, and yet James couldn't help wondering, was it enough? Firing them sent a message, sure, but should he have gone further? Pressed legal charges for harassment? Made their cruelty public instead of handling it internally? That's the thing about justice. It's rarely clean. It rarely feels complete. What James did know was this. His CAF finally felt like a place worth walking into. Not just for customers, but for his staff. The laughter was real again. The respect wasn't forced. And the people who stayed, they weren't just employees. They were a team. And that's a kind of revenge the clique could never take away. So, let me throw this one out to you. Do you think firing them was enough? Or should James have gone further, made an example out of them, legally or publicly? I'm curious where you land on this, because sometimes the line between justice and mercy is razor thin. The CAF was quieter now, not silent, but calm. For the first time in months, people breathed easy while they worked. No sharp laughter cutting across the room, no whispers when someone walked away. Just the steady hum of coffee machines and the kind of chatter that felt safe. But then came the letters. Mark, the loudest of the bunch, sent his first. 3 messy paragraphs, scrawled with bitterness disguised as regret. I didn't mean it like that. People are too sensitive nowadays. He closed with a plea to reconsider his firing. James read it once, folded it neatly, and slipped it into a drawer. Another letter arrived from Sarah. Hers was longer, shakier. She admitted she'd laughed along with the jokes because she was scared to be the next target. She apologized for not speaking up, for letting others get hurt so she could stay invisible. James didn't fold that one. He read it twice, set it down, and just sat with it. The third came weeks later from Emily, the one who had mocked customers the loudest. Her tone was different. No excuses, no finger pointing, just a quiet admission. I thought cruelty made me strong. It didn't. It made me small. I'm sorry. James didn't reply to any of them. He didn't have to. Because here's the thing about apologies, they don't erase the damage. They don't undo the fear, the self-doubt. All the nights employees went home wondering if they were worthless. But sometimes they show that the weight of your own actions finally caught up with you, and that was enough. James often wondered if justice had really landed. Sure, the toxic clique was gone, the CAF was healing, and his staff finally laughed without glancing over their shoulders. But part of him knew the scars would linger. A cruel word spoken once might sting, but spoken daily, it carves into bone. That's when James said something to me I'll never forget. He leaned back in his chair, eyes tired but steady, and whispered, "Respect is free. Until you lose it forever." He was right. Those staff members had burned through their respect like it was endless, and by the time they realized the cost, there was nothing left to salvage. So, did James win? Absolutely. Did the CF change for the better? Without question. But was it perfect justice? That's harder to answer. Because the truth is, once respect is gone, you can't buy it back with letters or apologies. And maybe that was the real revenge all along. Weeks passed, and the CAF felt different. Not because the walls had changed, they hadn't, but because the people inside them had. There was space now. Breathing room. Laughter floated through the air, light and unguarded. Conversations weren't edged with fear or caution. For the first time in months, work felt like work that mattered. James didn't go back to hiding in plain sight. He still helped with coffee runs and stacked a box here or there, but he also started holding regular check-ins. Not mandatory meetings, not lectures from on high, but genuine conversations. How are you feeling today? Is there anything making your shift harder? Questions that weren't perfunctory, they were invitations. The staff responded, slowly at first, then with growing trust. Maria volunteered to train the new hires. Devon began offering guidance without resentment. Even the youngest staff started speaking up, suggesting improvements, sharing concerns. And James listened, really listened. He found a balance he hadn't known he needed. Visibility without intimidation, authority without tyranny, presence without dominance. He realized leadership wasn't about proving you had power, it was about showing principle, about demonstrating that fairness, respect, and accountability weren't optional. They were the rules. The CF became more than just a place to serve coffee. It became a team, a community. Employees started leaving notes of encouragement for each other during shifts. Smiles became genuine instead of cautious. Customers noticed too, remarking on the warm energy or friendly atmosphere. Unaware of the battles that had been fought to cultivate it, James sometimes caught himself smiling quietly behind the counter, watching his staff move confidently, free from fear. He had once believed being unseen gave him strength. Now he understood that being seen, visible, approachable, accountable was even more powerful. One morning, he overheard a conversation between two employees. One said, "I feel like we actually matter here now." The other nodded. "Yeah, it's different. Feels safe." And James let out a soft, satisfied breath. That's when he knew all the effort, all the strategic patience, all the difficult decisions had been worth it, because leadership, he realized, isn't about titles or fear. It isn't about firing people to make a point or forcing respect through intimidation. It's about principle. It's about protecting the people who do the work every day, giving them the space to grow, and setting the tone that kindness and accountability aren't optional, they're mandatory. The toxic clique was gone. Their impact was fading, replaced by culture rooted in dignity. The CAF wasn't perfect, and it never would be. But it had become a place where respect was assumed, not negotiated. And that, James thought, was far more satisfying than any revenge. As he poured himself a cup of coffee one quiet morning, James caught the reflection of his own face in the stainless steel espresso machine. The man staring back at him wasn't just the boss who had dismantled a toxic clique, he was the leader who had built something better in their place, and that was worth more than any victory. By the time the CAFS doors opened that morning, everything had shifted. The tension that once clung to the air like smoke was gone. The staff moved with ease, smiles no longer forced, laughter no longer cautious. And James, he stood behind the counter, quietly satisfied, not triumphant, not smug, just content. He hadn't needed to yell, to humiliate, or to make a spectacle. Justice had been served through patience, observation, and careful action. The toxic clique had been removed, the culture rebuilt, and the people who remained felt seen, safe, and valued. It was the kind of victory that didn't need applause, it simply felt right. James knew this was more than just a story about firing the bad apples. It was about integrity, about showing that respect is earned and cruelty has consequences, about proving that leadership isn't measured in fear or authority, it's measured in principle, fairness, and courage. As he poured a cup of coffee for a customer, James caught himself smiling at a simple thought. The work wasn't done. There would always be challenges, difficult days, and the occasional misstep. But the foundation was solid. Respect, once lost, could never be faked. And now it was real. If this story left you feeling the sting of injustice and the quiet satisfaction of justice finally landing, then take a moment to show your support. Like the video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories where patience, principle, and clever strategy turn the tables in unforgettable ways, because sometimes the quiet victories are the ones that echo the longest.